Welcome to Goldfish on Games and Slipstream 5000 for MS-DOS. We're going to be giving it the budget game review treatment, which is typically done for smaller and cheaper games so they get a review to match. This is the sold out edition of the game, which is a very basic release, to the extent that it boasts about including Acrobat Reader 3 on the back of the box, which is needed to be able to read that included manual on the CD. As the cover, well, it barely mentions anything about the game at all. And looking at the CD, we find that it's mostly filled with an installer for a local ISP, but if we look around a little bit, we can find the DOS installer for the game. So let's boot it up, shall we, and see what we have. After a few intro movies, we get this relatively clean looking menu. And it's from here that we can change the graphic settings and the controls, but also the global difficulty level. Going into the single player for now, we have the choice of practice, single race, and championship. And the first two are limited in what tracks you can play until they get unlocked. So let's go and do a quick championship run. And the first thing we need to do is select your racer. And this is clearly where we can see the developers found a rich seam of stereotypes and mined it heavily. Everyone gets hit with it, so I guess that's fine? And for the most part in game, all we really see is the weird and oddly designed craft, rather than the racers themselves. But they are quite chatty while you're racing. And it's also very 90s, down to the men being dressed for the slide, and the women being dressed for the ride. But as far as I'm aware, I don't think there's any real differences between the craft. They all seem to have the same top speed, acceleration and armour, so it's mostly a preference choice. But if I'm wrong here, please let me know. At the start of each race, you'll be introduced to the track by the two commentators, with one giving a basic overview,
Fine day at the first of the North American stages of the Slipstream tournament. Today,
and the other showing you a fly-through of the track itself, all while telling you what to expect.
Through the arches, you've got no chance over the top.
And these two will switch places between all the 10 tracks. But if you find them a little bit annoying, then don't worry, they don't talk during the race, and you can easily skip it by hitting the mouse button. And talking of racing, we haven't even done any yet, so let's get going. The movement is quite smooth, and feels more like you're flying an aircraft than most racing games, as we have to bank and weave to help improve our turning angle. But it doesn't feel quite as fast as its name would imply. This was released on MS-DOS in early 1995, a good half a year or so before the other game that you're thinking about, Wipeout. So the whole 3D future race genre was still trying to find its feet really. And when you stop comparing this game to other titles and play it for itself, it's actually quite a fun little title, as you can shoot at the opposition with your blaster, that will slowly recharge, and this does some basic damage to the handling as well as the engines on the other craft. And also to yours if they manage to hit you, and they will hit you quite often. But it will take quite a large number of shots to actually take someone out completely with just the blaster.
staying blaster damage. Current position first.
As this is a championship, you will get awarded points for where you place. So this is a step up from many other races at the time, especially on the PC, where it's either your first or your last. Now moving on to the next race, we find one that takes place in a city. Well, it mostly takes place under the city as we fly around tunnels for a good part of it, which helps show off the range of tracks that you can expect from this game. Each one is relatively unique with parts that split up, and there's even barriers that move around, so you have to be on your toes. This is really a pretty good 3D engine for a racing game, as it draws some pretty long distances, all without any pop-in. It really does feel like they could have used this for something more complicated, something like Descent possibly. Particularly when we get to those outside levels like the Amazon, where we can expect to see lots of trees and water. And this one also has some very tight turns and some much smaller paths for you to deal with. Now unfortunately, due to all those trees and their branches, the frame rate does take a hit in a few places. This is also the first track that we get to see the wireframes. Now these are used in many of the outside tracks to make it clearer where you can and can't fly, and you can't fly through the gaps in the wireframe, it's all completely solid, and hitting those are just as bad as hitting a wall, so you do really have to be quite careful. Now winning races isn't just about getting those points for the championship board, as the higher up the table you get, the more money you will also collect, which allows you to upgrade your craft. You can either get better turbos, improved systems, but also some weapons. Now these aren't strictly upgrades, they're actually additions, and as such you only get a set amount. So use them all up and you'll have to buy more. You can't recharge these in a race. Now seeing how tight the money can get, it's not often that you'll have a lot to spare, so having additional weapons isn't something you can always expect when you go into a race. But if you're lucky, you might actually find more cash on the track in the form of these tokens. Now there is also tokens that will give you an instant turbo boost, repair damage to either of your two systems, or even recharge your turbo so you can activate it when needed. These get littered around the track, but you can also get more by shooting down the blue and white planes that you see flying around. Now this tends to be much easier when you're out in front, as when you're further down the pack, they tend to get destroyed by everyone in front of you.
Put on the brakes. To be on my part of the track.
And when you do get the chance to shoot them down, be careful that you're not too close while you do so, as they might drop the dreaded reverse controls token. That's right, there's a downgrade as well as some upgrades. And as you can imagine, this makes it very difficult to fly. On top of the first person view, there is also a few additional ones, such as behind, the external to the side, as well as the TV camera mode, which might look very fancy but is almost impossible to use to control your craft. It's a bit weird, as some of these might have made far more sense if there was a replay mode, but as far as I'm aware, there isn't one. I mentioned earlier that there were 10 tracks. Well, depending on the difficulty you set, you might only see 6 or 8 of them instead. And that's because you only get to play the entire lot if you're playing on hard. Now it would have been cool if they gave you a bit more control over the championships, like being able to select which tracks you play or even changing the order. But no, it's a simple difficulty setting, 6, 8 or 10 tracks. Which is a bit of a shame really, as those last 2 tracks are really quite nice, as it has you flying directly around this city with all the flashing lights and distractions that come along with it. Or you have this one that's outside on a body of water, with just the wireframes guiding you around, and this amazing looking sunset that's going on at the same time. That is really quite pretty. Now races can be won and lost quite quickly, as if you take too much damage then it really does affect your ability to fly, either by massively slowing you down or by reducing how quickly you can turn. And on some of the tracks, that is a killer. So finding those repair tokens is a must, or if you can't see any of them, you might have to take the typically slower route through the recharge station. Now these will repair you while you're inside, but if you fly through them too quickly, then it might not totally fix you up, so you have to balance your speed with how much repairs you want done. The game also includes 2 player modes, with split screen as well as over a network. Now I never really played those back in the day, as I mostly played the demo, and that had a bunch of the races as well as a single track that you could play on, and that 2 player mode, well, it wasn't included. So I have to say I really did get to know that first canyon map very well. And there we have it, a fun and unique little racing game you can actually grab from the various digital stores if it takes your fancy. And until next time, I was the Goldfish.
This is Crystal Eyes.
And this is Lyle Mint.
And that was Goldfish on Games. Thank you for watching this budget game review. I do hope you enjoyed it. And if you've got memories of this game, good or bad, I'd love to hear about it down in the comments. And if you really enjoyed the video, then there's buttons below that you know what to do with. Or if you're not sure yet, then there's 2 other videos on screen that you can check out right now.